Welcome to the Crashing Church Show. I think it's my intro today, right?
Yep.
Welcome, everyone. We appreciate your joining with us. We wanted to talk today about Thanksgiving, mostly because we probably won't do a show next week since we usually do our shows on Thursday and Friday. And being Thanksgiving next week, we won't do a show. So we wanted to talk about Thanksgiving this week. So for the holiday, I have, as you could tell, cleaned my face, sort of.
Yeah.
I don't know that I washed. I don't know I washed it, but I shaved. I got the hair off of it.
Well, that's what they say. It's clean look, clean shaven.
Clean. So it wasn't really for the holiday. It was because I thought my mustache looked terrible. Do mustaches ever not look terrible, though? Really?
Well, ask...
if you're Tom Selleck, you can get away with a mustache.
Yep, I knew his name was Tom. I was trying to think of his last name.
Unfortunately,
if you're Tom Selleck or Sam Elliott.
Yeah, I am no Tom Selleck. I can admit that.
I would even say lump Kurt Russell in that because he looked wickedly awesome in Tombstone.
Well, I think when I had the long beard, when I first shaved off my beard, I kept the long mustache and kind of had the curls and everything. Yeah. And I actually thought it did look good as far as that sort of look. Like I thought it looked good on me, but I was a little too self-conscious to actually wear it that way because it just feels too, I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah. So I don't know if I'll keep the clean shaven, but for now I've gone. I decided to get rid of the stash. So
you're going for you're not keeping with no shave November.
That is true, and that pleases me. I gotta say, I hate those sorts of things. Like I'm not into the do as everyone else is doing sort of thinking. So
yeah, mine is no shave ever.
No shave ever. Yeah. Mine's like head. whatever suits my mood in the moment, which has tended to be facial hair a lot lately. So, but
I do shave my head.
I may grow beard back. We'll see.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you've done a fair amount of. Well, I don't know, a fair amount, but you've done some looking into Thanksgiving as far as the history of the holiday and that sort of thing. Whereas I'm coming into this sort of just with, layman's opinions. So I think you may have more to say than me, but let's dig into it because I think that'll be interesting to see if you affect my opinion.
November is not Christmas. For everyone who starts celebrating Christmas early, right immediately after Halloween, Thanksgiving is in November.
Was that a black power fist? I shouldn't do that. How do I show support?
You're not
for
allowed
Christmas?
You're not allowed to culturally appropriate Thanksgiving. So
I culturally appropriated the black power fist.
Yeah,
in my support of culturally appropriating Christmas into Thanksgiving.
Yeah, yeah, but Thanksgiving is November, and let's keep it that way. I am a firm, absolute believer that Christmas music starts the day after Thanksgiving. So Christmas music should be banned from every airway until the day after Thanksgiving.
One of the guys in my neighborhood had posted on Facebook a similar thing where his kids started playing Christmas music right after Halloween, and he was so annoyed by it. And so I replied to that and said kind of the same sort of things that I've said to you, which is that Thanksgiving, it doesn't take away from Christmas to make Thanksgiving part of that, to make Christmas and Thanksgiving kind of the same big holiday, that it doesn't take away from either of them to do that because they share similar attributes. There's attributes that cross over. It's okay to be thankful at Christmas time, obviously, and it's good to be thankful. Eating turkey goes right hand in hand with Christmas. In fact, Christmas dinners traditionally are turkey dinners.
See, we do ham. We do ham on Christmas.
Right, just to keep it separate. Yeah, interesting.
Yep. I don't want to do a turkey for one holiday and then a month later do a turkey for the other holiday because then it makes it too much the same.
I did want to comment on just holidays in general, and this is
hold on. Real quick, I want to go back on the music thing.
Okay.
So this is a fun fact. Jingle Bells was originally a Thanksgiving Day song. Before becoming a Christmas anthem, Jingle Bells was an 1857 song.
That's interesting. It's not specifically a Christmas song, yeah.
No, it was
Yeah.
titled One Horse Open Sleigh, and its composer, James Pierpont, intended it to be a Thanksgiving Day song, but it became so popular around December 25th that in 1859, the title was changed to Jingle Bells.
I believe you just won the argument for me. Christmas music is Thanksgiving music.
No, no, no,
Proof. That's
no.
proof
This
positive, right?
song was originally called A One Horse Open Sleigh, and it was intended to be a Thanksgiving Day song. Now, it was just popular, and so that's why they changed it. But you're not going to do Silent Night for Thanksgiving. That's not what that's for. Silent Night, obviously,
Right. Well, I do.
describing the night of the birth of Christ. So, no,
Or
you
have a
do
holly jolly
not
Christmas.
have a jolly. Yeah.
Have a holly
Yep.
jolly Thanksgiving.
So, or a white Christmas. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. So
Yeah,
you
I see.
don't do
I
those
love it. I
things.
love it.
Yeah,
Well, and
that,
one of
but
the big reasons, well, let me comment on the holiday thing and then I'll come back to more of my thinking later. One of the things I wanted to start out with, though, is the idea that, and this is not, don't translate what I'm saying to Thanksgiving because I don't feel this way about Thanksgiving, but there are holidays that just feel like made up holidays, right? We cracked a joke about the line from Hocus Pocus about everyone knows Halloween was made up by the candy companies.
the candy companies, it's a
um,
conspiracy. I don't think
conspiracy.
people got that reference when I said it when we were talking about
Right.
Halloween.
But the funny thing to me is that is actually how I feel about some of the holidays, specifically, primarily Valentine's Day. I really do not like Valentine's Day and never have. One of the things I've always felt about Valentine's Day is that we shouldn't need a special day for love. Like love should be a year-round thing, and it should be
Yeah, yeah.
like celebrating it. Like that's the day that you bring flowers to your wife. Why aren't you bringing flowers to your wife whenever you want to show love for her, which should be, relatively consistent? Or alternatively, if flowers are silly to you and that's not part of how you express love, your quote unquote love language, then why would you bring flowers on Valentine's Day? Like show her the same love that you would the rest of the year. And so yeah, I just really kind of hate that made up holiday. And Thanksgiving, like I said, I don't fully translate that to Thanksgiving, where Thanksgiving is entirely made up holiday, but it does seem a little bit more on the holiday light spectrum of things, where it feels more like it's a holiday to to sell turkey. And we should
Yeah.
have thanks year round. Like having gratitude is something that we should always have, and it doesn't need to be reserved to a holiday. Now, sure, I mean, having a special day that brings out a specific point. I mean, it's the same thing with the birth of Christ, right? It's like we should worship Christ year round. It shouldn't be just a Christmas thing or just an Easter thing. And so I understand that context, but I don't necessarily feel special about Thanksgiving in the same way that I do about something like Christmas or Halloween.
I think that's because our culture has changed what Thanksgiving is supposed to be. So, in the history of Thanksgiving, the New England colonists actually celebrated Thanksgivings, or a day of Thanksgiving, regularly, and they would do it. It was set aside as days of prayer.
I'm on board with that, like monthly.
Yeah. Well, they just it was for whatever they could have done it because of a military victory or the end of a drought. They would celebrate days of Thanksgiving. The U.S. Continental Congress proclaimed a national Thanksgiving upon the enactment of the Constitution. So after 1798,
Right.
the U.S. Congress left. By the way, I do want to say this because some people might be wondering why I'm wearing a beanie and dressed rather warmly. It was 52 degrees this morning, so I am
52.
showing. Yeah, I am showing that in Florida, 52 degrees is very cold, and
It's
so
like 30 degrees outside here or something.
Yeah, we don't
or
we
less.
don't like. Yeah,
With the wind chill, it's colder than that.
Yeah, your cold days in the last few days, your nights have been like in the teens. So
yeah.
But here our low was 52 this morning when I woke up. So I'm cold, and so I'm very thankful for warm Florida weather in
So
the
you're
winter
showing
time.
thankfulness through solidarity.
I'm reminded why I love living in Florida because when it's cold, and these are cold fronts. This isn't like a cold season. This is a cold
Your
front.
cold front comes through and it's 50
It comes through, it
degrees.
lasts a couple of days, and then it's gone. Yeah.
I
So
do
we'll be
remember
back.
though when I was in the Philippines serving as a missionary for 2 years, and I remember because Philippines, right? It's hot, muggy, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so
Yep.
but I remember one time getting stuck in a rainstorm and getting soaking wet and just freeze. I was so cold because your body gets used to the heat. You know, you get used to
Yep.
whatever
Yep.
situation you're in, so it doesn't
Yep.
have to be as cold as you might be elsewhere to feel cold. I remember I was shivering. I was so cold, and it was probably 70 degrees, but I was wet, and I was
Yeah,
just so
and
cold.
here, yeah, here, if I spent a summer working outside in my garage the entire summer. It was very, very hot. The garage was probably
Yeah, you get
95
used to that. Well, it
degrees.
was the
Yeah.
same thing when I came off my mission back to Utah, and I came back in
I'm
October.
sure you
So
were
it was,
freezing. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
October, and so I had months where I was really cold all the
Yeah.
time and stuff until I
But
got a little
I
more
would
used
I
to it.
would go inside the house, and I set the AC at 78 degrees. And because just from spending all day in the garage and then going inside the air conditioned home at 78 degrees, I would have to put a blanket on. I would wear a blanket because I was cold. So
All right.
back to
Yeah, tell me more
the
about Thanksgiving because I know you did some looking
Yeah, this
into it,
is
and
really
I'm
cool.
curious.
So after the 1798, the U.S. Congress left Thanksgiving up to the states to decide when they were going to establish it.
Okay.
So there was a woman who is considered the mother of Thanksgiving. That is Sarah Josepha Hale. And she started writing about
Okay.
Thanksgiving in 1837 in articles that were published, op-eds and whatnot. But it wasn't until she wrote President Abraham Lincoln and the Secretary of State under the Lincoln administration during the Civil War that there should be, she had always advocated that there should be a national day of Thanksgiving. Now, people had celebrated days of Thanksgiving, but there was no real holiday set aside for the country. So Abraham Lincoln decided, hey, let's do a national declaration, or he declared Thanksgiving as a national holiday, and he originally did it as the third Thursday in October, and it wasn't until Franklin Roosevelt,
Franklin, yeah.
he wanted to make it the last Thursday of the month. So that's when it ended up being.
Right.
No, I beg your pardon. Abraham Lincoln was, yes, he did do it on the third Thursday of the month instead of the fourth, and that was what Abraham Lincoln wanted, was the fourth Thursday in the month, or the last Thursday of the month. So because it varied on which Thursday of the month it was going to be. That's when Franklin Roosevelt said, "Okay, let's call it the third one." So as far as the traditional Thanksgiving fare, what people eat at Thanksgiving, this one really changed throughout the years. So there is no documented evidence that turkey was even served
Sure. Yeah, I recall
at the
hearing that.
first Thanksgiving. So
Probably more likely they served clams and
the
fish.
colonizers, the Pilgrims at Plymouth, they went out with some of the Wampanoag natives, and they did 3 days of gathering and hunting, and they called it fowling. So they
Right.
got different kinds of birds. They got geese, they got duck, they got I can't remember all the different birds, but anyway, they called it fowling, and so a lot of different birds were served, but also they
Possibly a turkey. Yeah, yeah.
the possibly, and it wasn't actually part of Thanksgiving until Jane Austen in the 1880s established turkey as the image of the first Thanksgiving at Plymouth Rock, or in Plymouth, the Plymouth colony. So her writings, Jane Austen, now 260 years after the actual first Thanksgiving, she kind of established the
Right.
normal type of
Well, and then
Thanksgiving.
it's enhanced and solidified through commercialism and
Yeah.
advertising and different things
Yeah.
like that, paintings,
Now,
different things like that.
in the first things,
Same thing with Santa Claus, right? Like the look of Santa Claus, like it became this,
exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
it's Coca-Cola, really.
Santa Claus is supposed to be an elf, so he's supposed to be short and small.
Well,
And
unless you go back even to Saint Nicholas, you know, then he looked like a priest, you know, a Catholic
well,
priest or something.
the image of Santa Claus as we know it, of
Maybe
course,
not a
what's
priest,
the night before Christmas describes him as
a
as an
jolly
elf.
old elf. Yeah, yeah.
So he was actually dirty too. He was dirty from all the soot and everything, and he
Yeah.
was he was kind of mischievous.
But
He
that,
was
yeah,
like a
the clean red with the white and stuff that was established through
yeah,
commercialism and
exactly.
stuff, and so
Yep,
yeah,
exactly. So the the first Thanksgiving, or the Thanksgiving that was celebrated, the day of Thanksgiving that was celebrated, and actually it was 3 days of Thanksgiving. The feast that they had with the Wampanoag natives and the colonizers, the colonists. They celebrated this for 3 days. There were a lot of games. They would play in the fields. They would have shooting sports, and they ate a lot. They did eat a lot of shellfish. I know that lobster was on there, clams was on there,
right.
seal was one of the things that they also ate. So there were a lot of different things that we absolutely
Seal,
don't. It's that seal, yeah, yeah. They had
interesting.
seal.
That traditional Thanksgiving seal. It's something
Yeah,
we should
yeah,
bring back.
exactly. Now it was
Yeah,
Benjamin Franklin.
seal.
Benjamin Franklin. I think this is one of the reasons why turkey became such a normal thing. It was originally promoted to adopt the turkey as
Right, by
the
Ben
national bird
Franklin.
by Benjamin Franklin, and it didn't happen. So we have the eagle instead, and the the Northerners actually wanted the the government to declare it as a federal holiday, and the Southerners were particularly against Northerners. Now, I kind of agree with some of that because in sports, I hate every Northern team. I can't stand them. And in Florida, we get a lot of
That's your
yeah,
Florida
and in
bias
Florida,
coming into
we get a
play.
lot of
Go
Northerners
Gators.
who, yep, exactly. So we get a lot of Northerners who come here as well, and they want to change Florida's politics, or they have changed in the past Florida's politics. So I'm pretty fairly against those stupid Northerners. So no offense to any of the listeners, because
Blankety
thanks
blank Northerners,
thanks
get
for
off my
watching.
lawn, you
Yeah,
grumpy old
yeah.
man. That's
So
you, Northerners.
there were tensions that prevailed in the mid 19th century, obviously with the Civil War, and the Southerners were particularly against any
Just because
nationalized
the Northerners
holiday
liked it, they
because
were
the
against it.
Northerners liked it exactly, and yet
That's tribalism for you.
Virginia being a Southern state during the Civil War was right next to Delaware because they share the border of Washington D.C., and they both surround Washington D.C. One is on the
Right.
west, the other one is on the east, and that's Delaware. And Delaware is considered a northern state, and Virginia was considered a southern state. And Virginia was one of the most prolific uh, participators in the Civil War, being very against the Union. So anyway, it was in 1942 that Roosevelt finally declared it as a
Right.
national holiday. So yeah.
Well,
So,
so I have two thoughts on the whole, you know, Christmas and Thanksgiving thing. So the first is the following. If someone, say, for example, had a birthday in December, the fact that your birthday falls on, say, December 15th or whatever, the fact that you have Christmas decorations up, the fact that you're listening to Christmas music doesn't take away from your ability to celebrate that birthday and to make it a
nope.
special day and to make it
Oh,
meaningful.
you're talking about Christmas? Yeah, yeah,
And so in that regard, I feel the same about Thanksgiving. Like I agree with the sentiment that Thanksgiving should be understood and celebrated and the importance of, you know, bringing family together and showing gratitude, reminding yourself of gratitude and how grateful we are as a nation, and the joy of, you know, the food as it's actually an
yeah.
important thing, even though it is commercial and it's a little bit silly, you know, a day to stuff yourself. I actually appreciate it and I like it. but I don't think that having your Christmas tree up and listening to Christmas music around that takes away from that in the same way that it would if you had a birthday. And then secondly, now I've totally spaced my second. Oh, I remember it now. Here's my second point. As I get older, and this is the real reason. As I get older, time goes by so fast, and putting up Christmas is a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to get the decorations up. And what I find is if I wait until after Thanksgiving to put up Christmas and to do all that work and start listening to Christmas music, that I turn around, I'm so busy with work. I work all day. I'm focused on other things. I don't have enough time to actually enjoy the holiday, and so I miss out on some of the enjoyment that I have by extending that out. So that's one of the reasons why I've moved my Christmas celebration. I refused to do it before Halloween because I love Halloween. I love that season so much. And I do think, if you have a Christmas tree up during Halloween, it does take away from the Halloween season. There's no getting around that. But I don't feel it does that with Thanksgiving. So by moving Christmas, celebrating Christmas up for me, I'm able to actually have time to enjoy it, to have the Christmas tree and the lights that I enjoy and the music that I enjoy so much. So those are my big two arguments on why I feel it's okay if someone has that point of view.
Well, I think that there's merit to some of what you're saying for sure. And it's really the intention of the person who is doing it. The problem is that the holidays, in particular Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, have become so commercialized, where the point of the holiday, the reason for the holiday, is completely dismissed by all of the commercialism. So there is, for Thanksgiving, for example, there's such a distraction now in the country that we no longer celebrate white colonization, and
Right.
Thanksgiving is now becoming this
people
synonymous. It's becoming this synonymous part of white colonization, and to the point to where they've now declared the entire month of November as Native American Month or Native American History Month.
But that's not true in my circles. In my family, my friends, people where I live and
I'm
stuff.
not talking about that.
True.
I'm talking about culturally. It's because that's what's happening. The intent of individuals is different, but it's the cultural thing. It's what is publicly being
they're trying
commercialized.
To push that for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is their public society is publicly doing this, and it's not. I don't think it's the communities. I think it's more of corporations. It's Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's the elites who are pushing this, and you have this wokeism that's now going into all of these holidays.
Hollywood's long had an obsession with that noble native kind of idea.
Well, you look at but see, here's the thing: is if you're going to do something like that, why is it being done in November when the history of Thanksgiving was very different than what is publicly being
it's not the same
today.
thing as Custer's Last Stand or something, but they conflate it as if that's the same thing somehow.
So Squanto, who was a native who was sold into slavery, he escaped and fled to London, and he was finally able to go back to the Americas, and he was one of the members of the natives who taught them how to catch fish, how to cultivate corn, how to avoid poisonous plants. So he really helped the English colonizers. When the settlers at Plymouth went to Plymouth, they were actually greeted by members of the native tribes in English. They were not struggling to understand one another because the natives have already become, some of them, I'm not saying all of them, some of them had already become fluent in the English language. So they were able to communicate rather easily, and they were very friendly. The Wampanoag tribe was very friendly with the colonizers, and it wasn't until about 64 years later that there was the first war between them and the colonists. So, but the first ones definitely weren't. They were very, very friendly.
Yeah.
So but there's this image that is being brought about, like in the 1621 project, that slavery was always around, that the colonizers are horrible people, that that all white people are somehow should be associated with that type of attitude, and it's completely
I had to look it up to verify because I was like, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, and I was right. It's 1619, not 21.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
the
1619
1619. I was
project.
like, something's wrong there.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Yeah. So the that this image that is being pushed now, that that is really just causing so much division. So that's kind of the history of it.
It's yeah,
And
that ties into the whole white man is evil. Yeah,
yeah,
narrative.
exactly.
And
And
it's
so,
so
but there's just this huge commercialization. So now Thanksgiving is all about turkey. It's all about the dinner. It's all about football on Friday
and Black Friday.
And Black Friday. And they start pushing these Black Friday events now. The day after October, there's all these companies online are having their early Black Friday events,
which I don't begrudge that. You know, I mean, I'm not against
I don't,
commercialism.
but again, it takes away from the purpose of what Thanksgiving is, and
it's a balance thing.
Yep. And commercialization is the same thing that's happening with Christmas.
Right. And I was going to talk about, and we've talked about Christmas in that regards before, but it's a balance thing, I think. Going back to the Hollywood, thing with the Native Indian and stuff, I don't think there's anything wrong with the idea of, like we used to look at the Native Americans as if they were the bad guys and the white cowboys were the good guys, back in the 1920s, 1930s, 1950s especially, and because Hollywood portrayed that, right?
With all the movies, yeah, it was Hollywood that did that. It was absolutely Hollywood. Well, right. Now hold on, it does go back to the 1800s, because who was it that proclaimed the only good Indian is a dead Indian?
Right,
and that was a person in the federal government, and so when the white settlers started moving across the plains or the frontier, yes, they would kill Indians on sight just because of that narrative that was being pushed. So there was definitely a problem. You also did have the tensions throughout the entire history of the settling of this country, but it didn't start that way. And that's what's so important, is it did not, and especially in America, they always want to push that Christopher Columbus was a horrible person who killed natives without reservation, and it was absolutely false. There's no evidence whatsoever that supports that. So they always push that narrative. So early on, it definitely didn't happen. Later on, it did, but let's also remind everybody,
not to the level that Hollywood's portraying it. It did happen, but that's what I'm talking about, balance.
Right, but we also need to establish that the natives were extremely hostile towards one another, that they did take one another into slavery, that they did kill one another, that they did go in and they would raid each other's villages and steal the women and enslave the children. All of these things did happen. So this white versus native was pushed by the federal government in the 1800s, and then pushed by Hollywood, and it really just exacerbated it.
So you're a huge fan of Dances with Wolves. I just watched this show on Netflix, Amazon, I don't remember, called The English, and it was set in, it was a Western, and it was related to the Native American relationships. And it was interesting. It was pretty balanced and stuff. But the reason why I bring it up is because as I was watching it, I was thinking about this narrative that Hollywood pushes. And The English is actually quite fair on that narrative, relatively speaking. But a lot of times that narrative is not fair. And I was thinking about, even like with Dances with Wolves, which I know you love Dances with Wolves. And I'm not saying I don't.
Absolutely. It is one of my absolute most favorite films ever.
Which is, it's not, I'm not as enamored with it as you are, but I do appreciate it and like it. So don't get me wrong in what I'm going to say. But I was thinking about how even in Dances with Wolves, which is a really well made show, there is still definitely a narrative there of the noble Native American and all white men are evil. With the exception of Kevin Costner, like every other white man in that show is terrible. And yeah, it is this obsession that Hollywood's long had to portray the situation that happened as if the Native Americans were nothing but peaceful, noble people, which, as you just pointed out, was not true. There were good, noble people in the Native Americans. There were also evil, terrible, murderous
Well,
people.
just remember in the film, though, do remember in the film that it was the Pawnee who went to war against the Lakota, and that was when Wes Studi, who, by the way, we just celebrated Veterans Day, and I saw this post from Cowboys and Indians magazine, and they had a picture of Wes Studi as a young member of the military. And I had absolutely no idea that he served in the military, the U.S. military. And so it was really cool to see. It's a black and white photo of him, of course, in his military uniform. And anyway, in that movie, of course, they did show that yes, the natives did go to battle with one another. They had war parties and they would war with one another. But I think you're very you do are right that they do establish that. And
it's more the all white men are evil thing that I was thinking about. Just like Hollywood's long been obsessed with, in westerns particularly, to show the white men as these corrupt, terrible, horrible people. And even in the English, which was balanced on the Native American point of view a little bit, was less balanced on the white people. Like there was still, like, it portrayed the West as if it was nothing but murderous, terrible, awful, horrible people, which, okay, it's great for a movie, it's great for a show to make such a tense, horrible situation. But like it was the idea that you were going to even interact with a white person was, if you were out west, if you were anywhere west of the Mississippi, like you're going to be murdered by anyone you come across, and mostly the white people that were just these terrible, terrible, horrible people that were nothing but murderous. And the reality of history is that's not true. Most people
it's not true.
Most people weren't murderous.
There were definitely skirmishes, and there were definitely cases where,
and there were definitely murderous people. Yeah, I mean,
well, but there were murderous people on both sides. So there were natives who would kill settlers and would provoke settlers, and then it was also the other way around because of that statement: the only good Indian is a dead Indian.
And Hollywood exaggerates it, is my point.
Hollywood definitely exaggerated it. Now, in Dances with Wolves, at the time when it came out, we were both serving missions for our church, so I didn't see it till after it was released on video. But when I saw the movie, I was completely enamored by it. But it left such an impression on me that I did just a ton of study. I bought books. I bought a series of books about the natives and learned all about their culture. I used to go to the Native American Cultural Center in Salt Lake City, and they were just so welcoming and inviting, and it was so neat to go there. I went to a lot of powwows. Here we have the Native American celebration at Princess Place in Palm Coast, Florida, every year, and it's a really incredible because they have it's a big powwow for 3 days, and they have even Aztec Indians that come up from Mexico, and or Aztec natives, and they come up from Mexico and they do their dances, and it's just really cool to see everything, and everybody just absolutely loves it. So throughout history, the natives and the white settlers from Europe, I should say just European settlers, they were very friendly towards one another throughout the time, as well as hostile towards one another. And the same can be said, of course, today, because that's reality. We have this race baiting that is happening so much in the country. So they were very friendly towards one another. The French and the Indians, of course, fought together against the British in the French Indian Wars in the 1750s. So
Right. None of
There,
that's to downplay the atrocities that did happen. I mean, there's no question that the Native
no,
American
there were a lot
population
of
was
yes,
was
absolutely.
was across the board. They were abused and mistreated, and it was a terrible situation. We're not meaning to downplay that in any regards. Just that there, just pointing out that there was friendliness too, and there was some goodness, and especially in the
Yeah.
early part of the at the time of the first Thanksgiving,
So
that it
you
was a
brought
friendly
up
relationship.
Custer's Last Stand earlier,
Yeah.
and General Custer, of course, fought against the Sioux Indians, and the army that he had was only about 200, and he went against over 1,000 uh, Sioux natives and was obviously defeated. They were all massacred. The Custer's army was. Now, in the history of wars, the United States as a country has only lost one war to a man. The only person to ever win a war against the United States of America was Chief Red Cloud from the Sioux Nation. And when the war was over, they signed a treaty, and Red Cloud went onto onto the reservation. And when Sitting Bull, who was also a member of the Sioux Nation, went against the American government and fought, of course, against Custer at the Last Stand, uh, he was against Sitting Bull going to war against them. And the reason why was Sitting Bull or Red Cloud went on a visit to Washington, D.C., and he saw the military marching and visited some of the bases, the army bases that were there around the Washington, D.C. area. And that's when he became really against going against America. And it's because he saw the power of the military might that the American armies had. He saw the cannons. He saw the just incredible numbers of soldiers. And he said, no, you do this and you're going to lose. And eventually, of course, the Sioux did lose. Every nation that battled against the United States after Red Cloud did lose, even what's his name in Arizona. So anyway,
I don't know.
they really did war against one another. They did have peaceful interactions with one another. Quanah Parker of Texas was another person. He was a member of the Comanche tribe, and Quanah Parker. The reason why his last name is Parker is because he was actually a half white person. His mother was white, and she was taken into slavery when she was a very young child. She was adopted into the Comanche tribe. She eventually became a member of the Comanche tribe, and she really loved being a member of the Comanche Nation. And so Quanah Parker became a chief in the Comanche Nation. And um, when he finally settled on a reservation, he was so powerful. He was one of the most powerful chiefs in all of America because he owned so much. They had so much land in northern Texas and southern Oklahoma. And during all of the famous cattle drives in Texas, they either had to go hundreds of miles around the Comanche Nation reservation, or they would have to go through it. And in order to go through it, Quanah Parker would impose a tax on them or a levy in order for them to be able to cross a toll to cross through their lands.
Mm-hmm.
He became so famous that Teddy Roosevelt actually would visit. Theodore Roosevelt would visit Quanah Parker on the Nation, and Quanah Parker built this massive 2-story ranch home, and so he lived kind of as a white person would out there, but he was a pretty ruthless but very wealthy member of the Comanche Nation just because of what he did. So you have these stories that most people don't hear about. They don't hear about the thriving of some people because the atrocities that did occur, like the Trail of Tears with the Navajos being taken from Arizona to the South. Those types of things tend to overbear any of the
Yeah.
successes that
Well,
the
and
natives had
the
since then.
narrative goes askew, like even in the commentary as you said that, and you casually kind of say lived as a white person. My immediate thought was, yeah, is that really accurate? Like
No,
when
lived
cultures
as a
come
white
when
person would. This I'm
well,
talking
I
about
know,
this
but what I'm saying
idea.
is when cultures come together, they naturally adapt and embrace what's best about each culture. Living in a
Yeah.
teepee versus living in a stone building, like what's better, what's going to keep you warmer, what's going to keep you safer. To adapt that is not necessarily a adapting a white person thing, it's adapting a something that's going to be more effective for what you're trying to do. Same thing with
I
taking
agree. I
with
agree.
guns. Like, the fact that the Native Americans embraced the usage of guns is not that they started fighting like
From
white
very,
men.
very early, from very early on, as soon as they had the availability to have muskets, they did use them.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, and so just the narrative of saying, like, you see that sometimes where you see this idea that even in current Native American ideology, sometimes they'll be like, we don't want to live as the white man, like we want to go back to our roots. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
there's
There
something
is.
wrong with that narrative. Like, you want to go
Yeah.
live in a worse way just because that was your tradition hundreds of years ago. I mean, you see that in other cultures as well too, where it's not really, it's kind of a racist response that's being driven as racism is being pushed and pushed and pushed, rather
Yeah.
than just to say, hey, we embrace what's best about all cultures, and there's no
Yeah.
race isn't relevant.
Yeah. Holding on to a culture doesn't mean that you don't advance in your own lives. So holding on to a culture like the Native American Festival in Palm Coast, Florida, that's holding on to a culture. It's celebrating the culture. It's not
Celebrating
holding
it,
on.
yeah, is great.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
celebrating
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
culture. They do the same thing. Obviously, the Cinco de Mayo in May is not a Mexican holiday. They don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo in Mexico, but it's celebrated here as a way for for members of the Latin community to celebrate their culture, to celebrate how they were raised. And there's nothing absolutely wrong with that. We do the same thing with the 4th of July. We celebrate
Celebrate it. Yeah.
America. Yeah. We do the same thing with Thanksgiving. We celebrate and we give thanks for the things that we have. And it wasn't a holiday that was really proclaimed anywhere else. It was proclaimed here. And so when you go to other countries and you say, if Americans think that Thanksgiving is celebrated everywhere, it's Canada and it's here. So in 1857,
Yeah.
Canada, or the British Parliament, established Thanksgiving.
Yeah, but you see
Sorry, 1879. 1879, they established
right.
the Parliament did in Canada, and it's celebrated in the same month that the United States celebrates Thanksgiving. But again, that was 1879. So we have these holidays to celebrate what we have, and they are uniquely American, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just like going to a Native American festival is uniquely Native
right.
American,
and celebrating the good things, and that's one of the things about the holiday. Yeah. Like the fact that terrible things happened, there's no question about it. Terrible things happened. The fact that that's true doesn't take away from the good things that happened, and that's one of the narratives you see a lot, is that because the terrible things happened, therefore all of it is terrible, and we shouldn't celebrate any of it. And I think that's a flawed approach.
Yeah, they throw this blanket over all of it and say Christopher Columbus, which their narrative is false.
All white men's activity was,
but because they
colonizing.
You had
a lot of it was
you really did not get the tensions between Europeans and the natives in Central and South America until Cortez. Cortez was the one who really did the dastardly things against the natives in those cultures, and essentially ended the Mayan culture, and almost obliterated the Aztec culture. It was all for gold. It was greed, and those things did happen, but it didn't start with Christopher Columbus. And there were only a few people who did it.
It's the age old. I mean, that's just history, right? People come in and some culture
Yeah.
is wealthy and they come in, they conquer it and steal their wealth. And
Well,
that's not to justify it in any regard, but it's not unique is what I'm saying. It's not unique to just white men. It's not
right,
unique to just
right.
cult. Like the fact that coincidentally Europe became the power and ended up doing all of that is not because of the fact that white men are more corrupt than any other culture. Like you saw the same thing happen prior to Europe's and particularly Great Britain conquering the world in that regard. You saw it happen with myriads of other cultures. That's what cultures did. They went. The Egyptians did it. Genghis Khan did it.
They enslaved the Hebrews for 400 years.
Yeah. And
so you do have a lot of cultures.
And the Native Americans fought between themselves and did the same thing and conquered each other and stole things from for thousands of years.
They had slavery. They had
and so it's human nature. It's not a racist thing, and they're trying to make it a racial thing as if it's inherent to white men to do these sorts of things. No, it's inherent to men.
And there is one political party that's pushing the narrative. There's one political ideology that's pushing the narrative, and that's leftism. Leftism is what is pushing the narrative around the world. Conservatism does not. So with this leftism, they create this division because when they do that, they are able to establish power. They're able to gain favor. And of course, people that don't want to be labeled as those things, they fall in line. And many people in the conservative community end up falling in line because they don't want to be labeled as those things, even though they're not true.
Right. I was going to comment on the technology thing earlier, but I was going to mention Wakanda, which is sort of
Wakanda Forever.
Timely. Well, I haven't seen Wakanda Forever. I kind of don't have much interest in seeing Wakanda
It is
Forever.
all white people, particularly all white men, are bad. That's just
well,
what
all
it is.
men are. It's not just white men. It's all men are bad.
Yeah,
there
all
aren't
men
very
are
many.
bad.
From what I understand, there's not very many white men in it. But the black men are.
Yeah, there's only one. There's only one
too.
man. There's only one white man in it, and he's subservient.
But no, what I was going to comment on though was more the first one, which I'm sure is continued in the second one. That one of the things, which I'm not a big fan of the first one, like it was fine, but like. It's got all this renown as this really, really great movie, and it's just not that great of a movie. It's kind of one of the lesser of the Marvel entries.
It made a lot of money. It made a lot of money because of the cultural thing.
For various reasons, yeah. But one of the things that I thought was dumb about it, there's a myriad of things I thought were dumb, but one of the things I thought was dumb was how that they decided that if you had an advanced culture that came from Africa, that when they developed their guns and their shields, that they would develop that technology into traditional African cloaks and spears. And the concept is just so ridiculously stupid. That it makes no sense at all.
That's totally stereotypical. It's very hypocritical because they're establishing a stereotype that if you are in Africa, you must live as a native African.
Yeah, it's a stereotype, but then it's also illogical. It doesn't make any sense that you would do that. Like you would develop a gun as a gun.
Very few native cultures in Africa even do that anymore. Very, very few.
Yeah. And so just that same sort of idea of like, that Native Americans, to take back their Native Americanness, have to get rid of all technology or something like that, which I know not everybody's claiming that sort of thing. It's just, you see that idea sometimes. And I don't know how prevalent it is, but when you do see that sort of ideology, it's the same sort of thing, the implication in Black Panther, and I'm sure once again continued into Wakanda Forever, that in order to be true to Native Americanism, you have to wear robes and use spears and be these things that were true of Africa, before any advancement came along, and still true in some African communities where they don't have the advancement yet, so it is a current thing as well. But the idea that you'd, be able to get a camera to take pictures, but no, we still want to draw on cave walls because that's our tradition. It's kind of silly.
Not what they're going to do. They're definitely not going to do that. Now, there are a lot of it's really sad to see what is supposed to be the intention of reservations to preserve the native cultures, that they are actually self-governing. While they fall under the U.S. Constitution for their protective rights, because the Constitution isn't for establishing power of the U.S. government, it's to establish the power of the people over the U.S. government, to limit the power of the U.S. government. They cannot do certain things, but it also establishes the organization of the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
So the reservations, they are self-governing. So unless there is a federal crime committed on their land, the United States of America has no jurisdiction. That's why a lot of the native reservations will have gambling. They legalize gambling on their properties, and so people will go there in order to do that. And it's a way for them to establish commerce as well, and make money for their own people. But some of the problems that exist on the native lands is really, it's quite sad, because they do live in abject poverty. It's very tough. But they also,
it didn't end up being a good thing.
No,
I understand the idea. I understand why they were trying to. I mean, a very, very flawed attempt, but they were trying to give back to the Native Americans.
Yeah, they were supposed to allow them to still keep some of their lands.
They gave them the worst of it, so it was
well, but they became so dependent upon the government, and this is really indicative of the
welfare state thing that always causes problems.
Yep. And that's across the board. It doesn't matter what race you are. If you are dependent upon the federal government for whatever, for your food, for assistance with housing, whatever, you are going to live in poverty, period. It does not care what race you are. You will live in poverty. And it's not until that you get off of that, and when you say, I am not going to live that way, and the people who are very successful.
In retrospect, it would have been better to just absorb
assimilate. It's assimilation. It's not. And now we're not talking about the board.
We're treated it as if assimilation into the culture is a terrible thing. That's why people talk about it now.
We'll be treated like we're the Borg in Star Trek. You will assimilate,
like it's some sort of evil thing.
Yep, exactly. But that's not what it really means. What it means is that you will become a part of society, and that's how it shouldn't be. Succeed.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be a forced thing either. It shouldn't be assimilate or die, So like the Borg's attitude. That's not what we mean when we say assimilation would have been better, is that the government should have forced assimilation. It just should have naturally let assimilation occur, rather than trying to do these welfare compensatory things.
And it's kind of unfortunate too. I remember talking to a native Navajo about 20 years ago, 25, 26 years ago. And he had left the reservation in southern Utah, the Navajo reservation, many years earlier, but he was just in his 20s. And he said that he did not understand this hatred that is held among a lot of the natives on the reservation. And he said that a lot of his friends and others would complain about the white man and what happened to them. And his response to this, now this was a native Navajo. His response was, that was over 150 years ago. Get over it. It's done. It's over with. Stop living in the past.
All right.
And that seems to be the thing, is when you have a complaint society, it really came about for Americans in the 1960s, and it's the grievance society. And that's what Bill O'Reilly coined the phrase, the grievance society. And the grievance society is, we're just going to sit around and we're going to complain about everything. That's why complainers in the workplace.
The other way to look at it is the victim mentality that we live in.
That's exactly right. They say, I don't have this. And there was the talk on pride, Beware of Pride, by
Ezra Taft
Benson. And it said that there are two forms of pride, of course. There's the top looking down, but he said there's also the other form of pride, and that is the bottom looking up. Yeah. And so if you're at the bottom and you're looking up at the top, you have a pride that you hate the top.
Which, wow, what a What
Yeah,
a overlooked important idea.
it is, because you hate what the others have and that you do not.
Yeah,
And
the jealousy and envy stems
yep,
from pride.
yep.
Yeah.
And that's why pride is never mentioned as a good thing in the scriptures, of course, is because pride always derives division. It's what creates animosity towards other people. And you can either have pride where you think that you have more than others, and so that you think that you're better than others, which is definitely happening today. We are being ruled by elites. They think that they know better. They think
Right.
they're smarter than we are, than everyone else. And then you do have the bottom looking up, and you have those that say, well, all people in government are horrible people. They're all the establishment, and many people are not that way.
Or just the racial stuff, looking at, the
Yeah,
white man is the problem, sort of thing. It stems from that same sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah, and you do have the thing, of course, where you're now getting this hate Hollywood thing. You're getting this hate rich people thing, which it's so funny that the hate rich people thing is still happening so much, and the people who are saying it are the one percenters. They're the ones driving the division.
So weird. Yeah, it's weird.
They are the ones who control corporate America. They are controlling the federal government.
It's the same thing as corporate America driving the anti-capitalist narrative.
The World Economic Forum is the World Economic Forum, which is now pushing its solutions and its ideology and the leadership around the entire world, is pure elites. They are the 1% of the world population. Yeah. They are the super
thinking they
wealthy.
know better than everyone else. Yeah.
And they are not elected. Nobody elected them to do anything, and they are the ones controlling the entire world population through government. The only population that they are not controlling
sounds an awful lot like you hate rich people.
I hate what the elites are doing. That's what I hate.
Yeah,
I don't hate rich people. So.
Yeah, no, it's the pride, either pride coming down or pride going up, and hating pride is different than hating people, hating the ideology versus hating people. There is a distinction there that matters. So we're commanded to love all men, but not all ideas.
We are. And so just the purpose of today was really just to get back to what Thanksgiving is all about. This really quick. This does come from the chronicler Edward Winslow, who was a pilgrim. He said, "Our harvest being gotten in, our governor sent 4 men on fowling," and that's that term again we spoke about earlier, where they went out and they gathered birds. So we might, after a special manner, rejoice together. After we had gathered the fruits of our labors, they 4 in one day killed as much fowl as, with little help beside, served the company almost a week. At which time, amongst other recreations, we exercised our arms, which means they had shooting sports. Many of the Indians coming among us, and amongst the rest their greatest king, Massasoit, with some 90 men, whom 3 days we entertained and feasted. And they went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation and bestowed on our governor and upon the captain and others. And although it be not always so plentiful as it was at this time with us, yet by the goodness of God we are so far from want that we often wish you partakers of our plenty.
That's moving. Yeah, it really is.
To
see that gratitude and to think of it in terms of how plentiful the lives that we live in now. It's amazing to think about how grateful these people were when the most plentiful that they had was being able to kill a few deer and have some birds, that were easy, but they're living without electricity and living without cars.
Yeah, they don't have plumbing. They don't have internal plumbing.
Without plumbing and stuff. And they're so grateful for the bountiful that they have.
And remember too, they didn't have any manufactured goods. Now during the first winter, which was
they had to make it all. Yep.
Yeah. Now this is the fall after their first winter, and most of the colony, the pilgrims, spent that winter on the ships that they came over in, and half of them did not survive the winter. So this is after
Yeah.
so what the reason why they're so
And
grateful and why
everybody lost children and died
they did.
young, and
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Some entire families were killed. And so for them to say that they are so far from want after they went through that previous winter, what an amazing turnaround.
Yeah,
And
it really is
of,
moving.
of course it shows how grateful they were that they were able to come so far in such a short period of time, and very thankful that they had the natives with them to celebrate.
I know that it's easy for me to say we should all be grateful as I sit in relative, good financial situation compared to some people who are struggling financially. It's easy to forget sometimes, when you have things pretty good, that there are people that are struggling, and I don't want to belittle or take away from the fact that there are people who are struggling. But even the people, even when you're in a situation with struggling, I think having an attitude of gratitude, to use a phrase I've heard before, I think it betters your life and it helps you to move forward and to improve your life, and also plays into the peace that you have, no matter what situation that you're in, to take those things that are good, those things that are a blessing to you, and remember them, and remember how blessed you are in the ways that you are blessed. We all have trials, we all have struggles and stuff. Even when we have struggles, right? Or excuse me, even when we have blessings, we have great blessings. It's really easy to like one of the things I do, for example, is the house gets messy, and I get so frustrated at it. I'm like, why is the house so messy? Why can't we keep our clean house? Because we have kids and we're lazy, right? But it it gets frustrating to me, and so no matter what situation we're in, it's easy to find frustration in life and things not to be grateful for. And you have health issues, or you have some financial issues or struggles, or you have conflict with family members, or you have something that causes trials. And then to look back at these people who had sacrificed everything to come to the New World, and were living, relatively speaking, in terrible situations, and then we're so grateful for the bountiful that they did have, for the fact that they could, kill, and they still had to pluck and, kill and pluck and cook and, deal with all the aspects of creating their own meals every single day, make their own candles and churn their own milk, and incredibly difficult life that they lived in, that none of us have to deal with.
Well, as a matter of fact, so you said milk. They did not have milk in the original colony. It wasn't until much later that they actually had cattle.
They might have had some goat. They might have had goat milk.
Might have had goats, but they definitely didn't have. They did not have beef. So you talk about how thankful we can be, and again, this is the grievance society that comes out. I was watching some excerpts of they do like man on the street kind of thing, where they interview people on the street, and they interview some people in the Black community, and these are people who are complaining about being oppressed, and yet some of the people that were talking about how oppressed the Black community is were carrying bags from very expensive stores in New York City. So while they are holding these bags, while they have purses that might be very expensive, while they have clothing that's very expensive, they're pushing a narrative that they're oppressed.
And you see that a lot with college kids, where they're college kids are poor, but relatively speaking, they have means where they have housing, and they have food, and then they have clothing, and they have cell phones, and they have computers,
and they have TVs. They have computers. They have cars.
And maybe they're not great TVs or great cars or great cell phones, but
what 20-year-old has all of that unless their parents are wealthy,
they inherit it or something. Yeah,
unless they inherit it. And, there are just myriads of young people in the country who have to live that way. And it doesn't matter what race they are. They just have to, because that's what they have.
Of course, a lot of them are living that way because they're going into debt and then complaining that they're in debt for it. And
that's nobody's fault.
Yeah. So I did the same thing. So I could be a little forgiving of the dumb kid, going into debt thing, because I did the same thing. But
you did the same thing, but you did it.
But I take responsibility.
You didn't make them do it, and you didn't cause them to do it. And so what the narrative is therefore, we're this particular race, therefore we are oppressed. Just
right, and that's even
because
worse.
and if you are that race, you are the oppressor.
Right,
And
which is even
it's really
worse
unfortunate.
than that. Yeah.
So if we are thankful, you were talking about how most people are living in plenty. And I think back at the struggles that we have had, and you, of course, know well the struggles that we've had financially, and you went through many years of financial struggle as well. And it's really hard, and you do complain. You are upset. You are very stressed out. This is a time where a lot of people are very stressed out because of fuel prices, because everything is higher. They're saying now that
the job situation is getting
Thanksgiving's
worse,
going to cost 20 some odd percent more this year. Everything is higher. The availability of things. I know that Utah in particular, I talked to my brother the other day. He said turkeys are very hard to find in Utah right now because of the problems with the turkey farms
the supply
there
and demand,
having huge problems. So
cost
there
of food,
are there are issues, but does that mean that you guys don't have things?
So you don't get a turkey for Thanksgiving.
Have a ham instead.
Like,
it doesn't matter.
It is disturbing, and it's worth complaining about. Don't get me wrong. I think it's terrible that we in the greatest country in the world that you can't get a turkey at Thanksgiving.
You have these
is ridiculous.
Yeah, you're having third world problems in a first world country.
But then again, it's just a turkey. Like,
it's just a bird.
There are worse things to complain about.
Yep.
Yeah. And
exactly.
So, exactly. If you can't get a turkey. If you can't get a turkey this year, there's still a lot to be grateful for. You could still have a grateful Thanksgiving.
Well, think about this. I've thought about this a lot over the course of the last 15 years in particular, because that's how long I've had my son, almost 16 years. And the fact that there has been a lot of financial struggle throughout much of that time, like more than half of that time, we never went hungry. We always had food.
Exactly.
And we did get help along the way. So it's not, it's,
but you can get that help.
There were over 8 months that I lived in a house by myself in Salt Lake City with nothing in the house. This was a 2-bedroom house, and I had nothing but an extremely uncomfortable, painful twin mechanical bed that my grandmother had used because it could raise up and down, and it was
like a Murphy bed.
It was horrible on my back. My back was because the mattress was so thin, and my back every single morning was in a lot of pain. So I had that. I had my suitcases. I had a sleeping bag that I put on the floor of the living room. I had a cheap wooden table, very cheap wooden table, 2 plastic chairs that folded, and that's it.
Right.
That's how I lived. That's how I lived.
You never starved.
No, I never starved, but I lived that way.
You had a roof over your head. You had heat
and I had a job.
You had heat in the winter. You weren't going to die.
Yep. I did have a job, but I lived that way for 8 years. Or no, sorry, not 8 years, but 8 months. And it was help that came in. A family member came in, and all they were doing was bringing a piece of furniture to me. It was a coffee table that I asked for, and it was my mom's coffee table. I asked her because she wasn't using it, but they brought it up, and my brother and sister-in-law, I didn't say a word to them, hey, can you guys help me? They came into the house, and their jaws just dropped. They couldn't believe that's how I was living. And
the feces smeared on the wall.
No, but I didn't complain to anybody. And it was very tough. I definitely complained about the different situation that caused that, but I wasn't asking anybody for any help. And again, this was 8 months that this happened. So they walked through the house. They just this kind of shook their heads like, I can't believe this is happening. And then they left. And about 15 minutes later, after they left and they were on the road, my brother called me and he said, hey, so can you do us a favor and meet us over here at this time on this day? We're going to go to the Costco. And I said, why are we going to the Costco? And he said, you cannot live like that. And I said, I'm fine. And he said, no, meet us at the Costco. You are going to do this. And so they bought us they bought a bed for me, and they bought dishes, they bought sheets, they bought about $300 worth of food,
So
and they
was it
did
just
all
out
of
of
this.
curiosity? Was this right after your divorce?
This was while I was going through my divorce. Yeah.
That's right.
So this is before I got my furniture back. So all of my, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's another story. But anyway, so all this was happening, and again, it was easy for me to be down. It was easy for me to complain. But again, every day I had food. I had a roof over my head, and I had lived. As a missionary, you don't have much. You live out of suitcases, and so I knew what it was like to do that, and it was okay. And I did work on the road previously, so I again lived out of suitcases. So it wasn't something that I was horribly, depressed about. I was more depressed about the other things that were happening. So
The other point though that I think's important to point out is that through the years you pulled yourself out of that. You didn't just you worked, you picked yourself up, and through the years you got your college degree.
On welfare.
You've pursued your career and continued to work to improve that and get your income. And sure, like you're in a situation now where you'd like to make more money than you do. Like who isn't in that situation, right? But you're in such a better situation than you were then because of your attitude and your not just complaining, not just this victim attitude, but that I'm in control of my destiny and I can make these changes and stuff. And I can improve my own life.
It's easy to get down because inflation is so bad now that even though I am now making a decent salary, I'm still almost living paycheck to paycheck. Like I have to watch what I spend money on because
and I make more money than you, and I still am living paycheck to paycheck. So.
But you do have 4 people. You have twice the amount of people in your house than we do.
It's spending though. Living paycheck to paycheck is more it's an attitude problem more than a how much money you make problem.
No, so you're spending a lot. Yeah,
I just spend more. Yeah, like no matter how much you make, you can always spend it. Right?
You're gonna always spend more. But I mean, I am pretty selective about it. But again, I'm in a situation where we've got a house. Our rent went up, but we have a house. We have 2 vehicles. We have the ability to recreate almost as we want. And I've
one of those things you could always spend more on, right?
Now I've purchased, like last Thanksgiving. It was actually in Thanksgiving because we went to Utah to visit family. But while we were there, I spent over $3,000 on scuba gear. So, and I wrote a check for it. So while it's easy for people to complain, especially now because inflation is so bad, I think the complaints really should just be directed towards the government, the federal government, particularly the left, for creating such bad economic policy. Yeah, because people are suffering, because people do have less now.
Right. And there are people who don't have their brother call them and say, hey, you can't live this way. Let me buy you some stuff.
Exactly. So, but at the same time, we have plenty. We have our furniture. We have the electronics that we need. We have more than what we need electronically.
Way more than you need,
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. I mean, the ability for people to communicate, these phones that come out,
society,
that cost $1,200-$1,400. These phones now, and people have them, and even some of the poorest among us, they have these smartphones, and it's just the technology that we have, and so it's really important for people to put things into perspective and be very grateful for the ability to do that. And I think that for you and I, it's a lot easier to do that because we lived in a time when we didn't have those technological advances. We only had phones that were attached to a wall.
And walk over to the TV and turn the knob to change the channel. And then bang on it to get the reception back. Yeah. Walk uphill both ways going to school.
You would have to adjust the antenna, put aluminum foil on the antenna. On the
rabbit ears, yeah.
Move the rabbit ears, and then stand there and touch the antenna and put the other arm up while you watch TV so you could get a good reception.
And it was a black and white TV. We actually had a black and white TV when I was a kid. One of our TVs
we did
was
too.
black and white. Yeah.
We did as well. Yep. I remember that.
I think this has ended up being our longest episode, despite our intention to try to shorten them. So I think we should probably finish up here. But I mean, I think it's important. I think Thanksgiving's important either way. I think we agree on that. And the idea of reminding yourself of gratitude is never harmful year round and stuff. Whether or not you decide that it's appropriate to have Christmas extended into November or not, I guess that's a personal decision, and we can agree to disagree. So,
yeah, I definitely disagree.
So, anyway, I'm going to go turn on Christmas music as soon as we're done here. So,
you can play Jingle Bells. As long as
it's
you
a Thanksgiving song.
You can call
and that is
One Horse
my
Open
daughter's
Sleigh.
favorite Christmas song. She always wants Jingle Bells, so perfect.
Well, there you go. You say and you can teach her now about the history of the song Jingle Bells.
So, with that, thank you for joining us. Like, subscribe, and if you're on YouTube, if you're listening to us otherwise, then don't bother liking and subscribing because you can. We'll see you next time.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.